But before that, let me do two things. The first thing which I'm going to do is that I'm going to select all these McLaren assets. So I'm just going to select the first one and shift select the last one. And then I'm simply going to be clicking this button right here to create a new folder. I'm going to call this McLaren. Oops. McLaren. This is just to make our scene a little more organized. And so now what I'm going to do, the second thing is to change the color of this car, because right now it doesn't really look that good. So I'm going to go down to the material which we applied to this, car paint red. I'm just going to switch that. I'm going to increase the value to something like white, and I think it looks pretty decent. The only thing which I'm going to do now is actually I might go back to the materials option of this, and maybe we can go to exterior, car paint, and then we can choose another one. How about this one? I think this looks more natural, looks a little brighter, and I think I'm going to go with that. Actually, I think I applied it to the inside of the light, which I think I wasn't supposed to do. Let me apply it to the outsides only, like that. And this bottom part is supposed to be black, so I'm gonna keep it that way. Let me make this spoiler white, and the side mirrors, and this part as well, of course. Let's keep some of this stuff black as well, because I think that looks very good, and it creates contrast, which I like. All right, so I think we're good to go. Let's look at our reference and let's see if our car looks similar. Yeah, we are looking pretty good. The only thing which is not looking similar to the reference is that the lights are turned on. However, in our reference, the lights are turned off. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this. Actually, you know what? Before I'm going to undo that by pressing Control Z. Before moving this, I'm going to simply turn on snapping. I'm just going to move it one snap away, and then I'm just going to grab a glass material, and I'm going to be applying any of these glass materials to these lights. So all of them. Perfect. So now all lights are turned off basically, and then I can just snap it back into the original position. And now let's go to the back. Back lights are turned off as well, which is perfect. Right. So now we can move on to the next step, which is going to be creating, what do you call it? The environment. So for that, let me just look at my reference. So basically what we have in the scene is, what do you call it? Is basically this whole garage, which was created by these walls. So first let's add the walls, and then we're going to be working from there. So for the walls, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to add Quixel content, and then we can just go ahead and find some Quixel assets. Just wait for the Megascans bridge app to open. Now we can just go to collections, environment, and then urban environment. Here you're going to find all sorts of collections with real building assets. So maybe you can select that one. I'm just trying to experiment for now. I don't think that's going to look good. I think the one which I chose previously was this one, maybe. Yeah, I think it was this one. So let me just sign in, and then it's gonna show me which assets I previously downloaded, so you can just import those exact ones. Right, so I think I used this one, so you can just download that if you want to copy my scene. However, I would not recommend you to do that. I would actually recommend you to sort of come up with your own ideas and your own different your own ideas. I think I'm gonna just download this collection, so this whole kit which comes with all these assets. So let me just go ahead and add that, and once that is added, I'm just gonna select all these assets by pressing the first one and then shift selecting the last one, and then I can just drag all of them in my scene like that. And then to add some variation, I can also drag this collection as well. You can also download this one as well, but I don't think that's gonna look that good. And you have other options as well, so you can just pick and choose whichever one you think looks the best. So I'm just going to drag that in my scene as well. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to place this next to that, next to the other collection, and I'm going to make sure that it is scaled up properly. Let me turn on snapping just to see if you can snap it into the correct position. I don't think we can. So I'm just going to, oops, my bad. Maybe we set this to something like 0.25. It's almost there. So I'm just going to turn off the snapping, and I'm going to eyeball it manually. Something like that should be good enough. Yeah. And now let me just get rid of this. Let me close that. And now we can just simply go ahead and start to sort of build out my whole scene. So I'm just going to drag these individual assets. Now this part is super subjective. I would recommend you to not copy my layout, and I would highly recommend you to sort of come up with your own ideas. And this, I think, is a duplicate asset. I'm going to delete that. And yeah, just sort of come up with your own ideas, and what do you call it? Just create a garage of your own liking. For this, you can simply go to Pinterest as well. So you can just open pinterest.com, and from there you can just search for garage, and then it's going to show you a lot of really good references. So you can maybe go for something old school like this, or yeah, you basically have a lot of options. Or you can even go for something very modern like this. But for that, of course, you're going to need separate assets. You're going to need a different style of assets. These assets aren't going to work with that. But yeah, we're going for sort of that semi modern. We're going for sort of that half modern and half medieval sort of look, which I think should look pretty decent. Right, so we can start to build out our scene. So what I did in this scene was basically I had two of these windows lined up, and I had two windows above this as well. The reason for that was so that we could let in more light. So I'm just going to do exactly that. Let me select all these assets and move them apart for now. And that one as well. I'm just going to move them far apart for now. And let me just get rid of this as well, and this. I think that's all we're going to need. So let's start with this. Firstly, let's place this asset right here. Let's duplicate it by pressing Alt, and then we can copy it and duplicate it right there as well. Now snapping is turned on, and that is allowing us to sort of position this perfectly so that the moment this asset ends, that one starts. So that's perfectly fine. And let me add this right here. That's looking good. I think there's a gap in the middle. Yeah, there's a tiny gap in the middle, so I'm going to turn off snapping, and so I'm just going to be dragging this in that, and I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, I think it blends in pretty well. And then I'm going to drag those assets in, something like that, and that as well. And finally we can drag that corner asset in, and with that corner wall we can sort of continue this whole wall. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the two of these assets, and then I'm going to move them forward. Let's rotate them 90 degrees. And then we can maybe go to our top view. So just go to our top view, and then we can place them properly. And let's place it right there. So I'm just going to go back to my perspective mode. Let's see how it looks. Just make sure that it looks good. Yeah, it looks fine. And then I'm just going to be selecting both of these. Let's duplicate them like that. And I can just continue to make a whole wall for us. Alternatively, what you can do, another option which you have is you can, in order to save time, what you can do is you can simply create a cube and then just apply a brick texture to that cube, and then you can just scale that up and sort of fill the whole space with that. However, that is going to look a little less realistic because if I just zoom in, you're going to see that these textures are going to have their own sort of, what do you call it, subdivisions as well, and their own sort of slight imperfections which are going to make the whole scene look a little more realistic. So I think using 3D assets, especially high quality ones, that is a lot better than just using plain old 2D textures. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select all of them. Oops, all of these assets, and then I can drag them like that and then rotate them 90 degrees. And well, that part, this part of the wall is not going to be that visible, so you can maybe skip this part or just like add a plain cube or something like that, because we do want to block off the light. So we can't just leave it empty. And then let me duplicate that once again and rotate it like that. This time I'm going to be placing this wall right over here, something like that. And then I can maybe continue this forward. And then just duplicate this a few times as well to sort of fill in the whole gap of the wall. And with that, I think we are done. Right, so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be creating the second floor of this sort of, what do you call it? Yeah, basically the upper portion of the garage. So I'm going to be selecting all these buildings. Let's select all of them in our outliner, and then I'm going to be simply duplicating them by moving it up, something like that. So let me just go in and make sure that they are aligned properly. So I'm just going to be moving them such that there's no gap in the middle and it looks seamless. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Right, so our garage is coming together pretty well. And so the buildings at the back, the walls at the back are going to be these ones with the windows and everything, and it looks pretty decent. Now we can move on to adding the what do you call it, the ground. So for the ground, I chose, I think it was a tile texture, a concrete tile texture, something like that. Let me just go to my library to see which one I downloaded. Yeah, it was this one, sidewalk tiles. They're actually meant for sidewalks, but I think they work pretty well with this scene as well. So I'm just going to download that and add that in my scene. Then you can just select your landscape and go down to landscape material and just drag that in like that, right? So that's perfect. And now what you can do is you can close this out maybe, and then just make sure that your scale of your material is fine. So you can just open your material by clicking it, and then you can just adjust the tiling. So by default it was this, which is pretty small. So in order to increase the size of the tiles, you can just click this button right here, tiling offset, and then you can reduce the numbers of the scale of basically your tile and tile X and tile Y. So the smaller this number is, the larger your tiles are going to become, right? So there's that, and I think they look pretty good. Also, one thing you can do is you can maybe increase the normal strength. So if I just uncheck that, you're going to see that your texture looks pretty flat. However, if I check that and increase it, by default it's 1. So if I increase it to something like 3, you're going to see that it's going to look a lot more detailed and a lot more sharp and rough. Right, so there's that, and I think it looks pretty decent. Right, our whole scene is coming together pretty well. Now we can just continue to add more assets. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to my reference. And the next asset which we're going to add is going to be maybe that electric box in the back. Now this part again is very subjective, and I would highly recommend you to not copy my layouts and sort of come up with your own ideas. So let me just download this rack. So in order to get all these assets, what you can do is you can simply go to your collections tab, go to environment, and then you can go to industrial. And in the industrial, you can maybe go to either the abandoned factory or the warehouse. And in here, you're going to find all these sort of random assets, which I think fit in very well with the garage theme. And then you can just have maybe wires lying around and stuff like that. And so that's going to be your target. Your assignment for this course sort of is to create a very detailed garage with a lot of assets. So I'm trying to make this as fast as possible because I don't want to waste you guys' time. However, I want you to sort of spend a lot of time on this and come up with really cool ideas and really creative ideas. Right, so I think that looks pretty good. I forgot to close off the scene from the top. So for that, I'm simply going to be creating a cube, add shapes and cube. And let's increase the size of that cube in the X and the Y axes. Something like that. Let's move up. Let's position it properly. Something like that should be good. And then increase the scale of this so that it covers the whole wall, and then move it up to make sure that it is not intersecting any of our windows. I think that looks pretty good, right? And also we are pretty dark from the inside right now, so I'm going to be fixing that in just a bit. But before that, let me just go back to unlit mode so that we can properly see everything and just work on the scene without any interference from the lighting. And so let me just go ahead and maybe add this wooden ladder. So I'm just going to add that. And so let me just place it on the back right there. Something like that. And let me go ahead and position it properly. Let me rotate it slightly like that. And then we can just place it right there. And let me move it down as well to make sure that it is flushed with the ground. Perfect. I think that looks pretty decent. And now you can just go ahead and add as many assets which you want. So let me add some traffic cones as well. So let me search for cone. Let's add this traffic cone. Add. And then just drag them in like that. And I think our scene is almost done. Yeah, I think we're pretty much good to go. Let's add that electric box. I'm just going to search for box. And it's going to come up. Electrical box is right here. You can choose any one of these. So yeah, but I'm going to go with this. How about I place it right there this time? Or maybe yeah, let me place it right there. I think that should be good. Maybe we can move it up. Or maybe not. Maybe let's move it down. Something like that, so that so that it looks as if these pipes are continuing inside the ground as well. Right, and I think our scene is looking pretty good. Now let's move on to the next step, which is going to be sort of adding the camera and then lighting the whole scene and then maybe rendering it.